Hello YouTube, thanks for joining us again. We're going to spend today looking at volumes and breaking out volumes. So a little while back, I believe we did a video breaking down revenue, and this is the next phase or the next iteration of this. So what we're going to look at today is, it's the same kind of methodology. We're going to start at the top, revenues as an amount, dollar figure, and then we're going to step it down to the next level. But this is where we will branch off from what we did in the last video and focus more on the actual volume, so the actual units. Now, I speak to a lot of businesses, and oftentimes I get the comment that their business is unique, it's different, it's very different, and that I'm sure is true. There's different drivers and different fundamentals that drive revenue, drive cost of sales. But at the end of the day, it's there's some level of income, so there's some level of expenses, and it's trying to just identify these to specific accounts. So whilst a business might be different, all businesses fall into some tree that we can fall down or follow through. So starting at an amount, then as we go down, we can get into units and prices. We're going to then look at granular units and prices, so breaking out the units, and then we're going to look at some different ways at addressing units. So, for example, a common one being occupancy, so hotels, healthcare, aged care, general practice, dental, where there's a capacity limit, which defines what the revenue might look like. Then there's the SaaS or the cumulative units type business, where as you bring on a user, the unit generates the user or the member or subscriber will generate or be a revenue generating source down the track. So those are just some examples. There's a lot more out there, and there's a lot more granularity, a lot more linkages that we can look at in another video. But this is the one that these are the main ones that we'll address in this particular video. So at the top end, we've got amounts, so dollar figures, pretty straightforward. We look at apples, bananas. We're going to buy a bunch of apples. We're going to sell a bunch of apples, and we're going to sell a bunch of bananas. A common approach using this is looking at historical periods. What did you do last year? Is it going to be the same? Maybe put a growth rate or a percentage over the top of it. But at least it gets you to a dollar figure, and it gives you a rough sizing to what the business revenues and turnover will look like in whole. So that's the most basic one. And in fact, a lot of our models tend to be built this way because it creates a lot of flexibility or allows for a lot of flexibility within the model structure. So that's the first one. Now, if we go down a step, we're now starting to drill down into the driver tree. We've got units and prices. So units and prices just takes it to that one next level to go, okay, well, look, we know that our revenue is 30,000, but how did we get to that 30,000? Now, in isolation, probably is not hugely important. But when you look at change or growth or deterioration, that's usually when examining or looking into these next level of drivers, so moving down the driver tree, it becomes a lot more important. And it'll be more important looking at some of this stuff from an investor's perspective, because an investor will want to see, okay, well, what is driving change? We've got price increases. Okay. Revenue has been growing over time. Well, if that's purely from an increase in price, is that going to retract down the track? Retract later? Is that going to be sustainable? Or is it growth on units? Are we actually are we able to sell more at the same volumes? A healthy business, we want to be able to see a mix of the two. But obviously, ideally, you'd want to see increasing units or increasing sales in units, because that generally shows that your price is accepted, and you're able to grow the business by doing more of the same thing. And that tends to do things like preserve margin or even improve margins in a business, because it means that you're doing the same thing and there's an opportunity to improve on efficiency and do the same thing better or faster or more effectively. So this is the first layer. All we've done is taken apples, bananas. We've broken it out into our first layer of of volumes, which is just identifying on an average, and it could just be as simple as taking averages. We've sold this many apples, this many bananas in general, and this is the average price across that. And it could be as simple as taking the total revenue, dividing it by the volume that you've sold, and getting to an average price. This is commonly used in like SaaS terminology, where it could be average revenue per unit or per user. Like, these are very common methods, and it's a good first line to at least get you to some units and volumes. Now, if we take a step further down this driver tree and look at granular units. Now, I haven't got numbers in here because I wanted to kind of look at this in a bit more of a live way. So what this means is, or what we're looking at here, is breaking the units down even further. So, for example, a retail store, or let's use this one. Say they're a fruit wholesaler and they're selling apples. What kind of apples are you selling? Are they priced differently? Do they give you different margins? It's just taking the same argument, going from amounts to units, to a bit more granularity. And you'll see in here, this is just one method for doing it. You can layer it in a different way. But what we could do here is, we've got detailed revenue that we want to populate, and we're looking at apples. Okay, so what if we're selling Fuji's and Pink Ladies? And for the bananas, let's just go Cavendish. And what we're going to do is, we're just going to map or allocate these first two to apples, and we're just going to map this one to a banana. And since we're just assuming its bananas are the same, we'll give them the same pricing. So we'll make that $100. And if we go 150 on that, we've now got the 15,000 that we had previously. So cool, same product, same price, no worries. Now, with the apples, we want to get a bit more granular. So let's just say, and generally when you do this, you want to make sure that you have the historical source data to back these assumptions. Because if you're just focused, if you just look forward, it might be a good forecast or an operational or a transactional tool, and it could be useful to set metrics. But if they don't base themselves on historicals, then there might be a separation between what you're forecasting and what the historical trend shows, and that could present an issue when trying to explain why you've come up with these assumptions. So, for example, in this case, we might just go, all right, well, 275 units of apples were sold out of the 375. We could simply go that number minus 275 to get to the balance, but let's just keep it tidy and keep it and key in all our assumptions. So we get to the same 525 units overall, but we're now saying that we have 275 apples that are Fuji's, 100 apples that are Pink Ladies. And we might just price these at, well, let's just say to get to the same 80, let's just go at 70. And if we go 90 here, now it doesn't get us to the same number. I'm not going to go and work out the exact dollar figure to get it exact. But you do see that by breaking it out, you can already start to see, all right, well, if we're selling more of these, so if we increase the volumes here of Pink Ladies, if we sell more of these, we're now at 30,500. So we can start to see, all right, well, this is where the impact is coming from. This is how our revenue is growing, decreasing. Is it pricing? Is it pricing on specific products? So this is the next layer of drivers. Now, if we take a step sideways, so what we're doing here is just going deeper and deeper into the same number, so the same volume, which is getting more and more granular. Now, if we take a step sideways and look at alternative ways to look at revenue, to volumes. For example, if we look at occupancy. Now, if we have a look at occupancy, occupancy might be something like, beds. It could be, so that's why here I've just classified them as units, or classified the total as units. So for example, in here we could go, well, a hotel has 100 rooms. And of those 100 rooms, and it could be, say, an aged care facility, it could be, say, a general practice. But of those 100 rooms, 70% of the time, they're occupied. And then in the month, we can work out the days in the month. So, in here, we're assuming that the, whole hotel or whatever site we have can be utilized every day. Now, You might make adjustments for public holidays. You might make adjustments for, only weekday trading. So, general practice might be weekdays. So, you get closer to like 20 days a month. But for simplicity, we're looking at something that has a capacity. You have a room. You can only fill the room so much. So we're essentially looking to the capacity, looking at the maximum that you can achieve, and bringing back the level of occupancy based on that. And again, these are the numbers you'd want to track. So, for example, you'd want to be able to get to, all right, well, we know that we spent 2,170 days as a general, on a 31-day month. We spent 2,170 days, had 2,170 days occupied in the rooms, in the 100 rooms. And then this allows you to determine that 70% occupancy and work from there. Similar if we just go 80, 90%. Same concept with just two examples. So that's looking at a capacity-based volume. So what's the maximum capacity? And working backwards from there. And, another way you can look at this might be something like professional services, where, again, it's capacity-based. If it's time and materials, there's only so many hours in a day. Yeah, you can do overtime and get flexible with that. But at the end of the day, there is only so many hours in a day that an individual can look at a piece of work or do work and do billable work. And then you can work out a capacity on that based on number of days, hours, contracted hours, and then the percentage of their time that's billable. And then straight away you can work to another figure for dollar for your revenue and volumes. So, and this is very interesting because as soon as you start looking at capacity-based metrics, you can then quickly check or run two methods of forecast and double check whether your method of growth, for example, so say it's a new site, you're growing the number of occupied beds, so maybe you're increasing the number of beds on a bed basis. So for example, we're saying that it's 100 beds, maybe in month 1 you're at 10 beds occupied, 20, 30, so on. And then it allows you to then get to a figure to double check your capacity. And this is the same with billable hours. You can go to revenue. All right, we have $10,000 worth of revenue pending for this month to be actioned. But we only have 8,000 worth of billable hours available to $8,000 worth of billable hours available on a charge out basis to address those. Well, you're over capacity at that point. And that's a quick indication you need to bring in assistance or some of that work needs to be pushed out. So that's another way to look at volume, and it's quite useful. We use this actually quite a lot in a lot of our modeling. We're now going to look at the next layer of volumes. So we've just explored units and prices. We've looked at the granularity, or breaking out to granularity. We've also looked at capacity. So, what's the maximum unit we can provide? Now, the last piece that we're going to look at is what we call cumulative units, or commonly used in software as a service, so monthly subscriptions, annual subscriptions, all of that kind of, where you bring on a user and that user, subscriber, member, however you want to call it, and then that individual or unit will stay and accumulate over time, and that figure builds, and then those amounts are what you're charging against. So if we have a look at it from this perspective, and just a quick, looking up and down, we're not talking about prices here. We're just getting to the units. The prices can be charged or worked out once you work to the unit that you want to charge against. So, for example, if we, quickly look at the top, if we've got paid days as the end unit, we can charge against that paid day. So how many what's your daily rate? If you want to go to hours or anything more granular, you can, but at the very minimum, you can get to a day, a charge per day. Equally, if we're thinking about it from a billables hours perspective, or like a professional services where capacity is constrained by time, you can charge that at a rate of at the individual's charge out rate, for example, to get to what a revenue capacity might look like. And then the benefit there is you can use that revenue capacity against any revenue forecast assumptions to capacity and sense check. Now, the same goes for this SaaS and cumulative units example. We're just trying to get to the unit that will allow us to charge a price against it. So, for example, in this instance, we have a starting user base. Could be subscribers, it could be a monthly subscription, it could be an annual subscription, although annual is probably going to be dealt with differently. So let's just assume it's a monthly subscription to keep this simplistic. So, internet fees that should get charged monthly, telephone bills, gas is probably not, but telephone bills, anything with a fixed monthly payment, this is the method, or this is one method. So for example, we're assuming we're going to start with 100 users. That 100 user count should be verifiable somewhere. You should be able to look up your system, your ERP, or your software package, or your SaaS package to track how many users that you have that are active in system. And then what you can do is use that as the starting point. And also, just as a quick side note, that user base can actually get split out into further, because it might be users that are paid, users that are paying, users that are non-paying, users that are on a free trial that will convert into paying. So there's a lot of ways to break that out, but for simplicity and as the first breakout of this volume, we're just going to look at users as a whole figure that you might charge a per unit price to. So 100 users, we're growing the opening balance by 5%. So as you can see, this 5% figure is growing over time as the user base grows. Now, the popularity here is if the 5% continues over time, you're working the same revenue figure off a larger number that has grown at 5%. After that, we want to do stuff like, okay, well, we need to factor in churn. We need to factor in some level of users coming off, which is going to be the reality. You likely won't have all your users staying on. You might have new users coming on, some users dropping off. It could be some users coming off one product and moving to another. So, I mean, that's speaking to churn as a terminology that gets used a lot across industry. It could be used for losing users, changing users, so on. I won't get into that. But the main point here is we've got an opening balance. The opening balance is corkscrewing, and you can check out our corkscrew video that explains how we've come up with this. But the point is, we've got a closing user that has become our opening user for the start of the period. We're adding 5, we're taking away 3, and now we're ending the period with 103. I mean, technically, I know there's decimals here, but for simplicity, we'll work with this. And as you'll quickly see, the next period now starts with 103 users. And so our pricing might be on, and again, it depends on your pricing structure. If you charge people up front, what you might do is you might take the opening balance as well as any new users and apply pricing against that summation, and that becomes your volume. If you have an in arrears pricing, maybe you look at it from the whole period, any opening plus new, take away any that's left, and then that gets you to your end period number. So yeah, a lot of ways to cut it, but the main point here is you've got a user base that is building on itself. You've got a volume base, that is building on itself and growing over time. And that's the figure that you will be able to charge a unit price against. So this is very popular business model that's occurring. But yeah, hopefully that was helpful. We've just tried to, in summation, look at a few methodologies for drilling down to units and getting to more granularity and finding the insight. Are we drilling down enough in every step? And do we have enough information to support each drill down? And a good way to model or think about modeling in forecasts is every step that I take down, do I have the information to back that number? If not, then you've probably gone too far. On the flip side, there's also a consideration to the type of business. Are you capacity based? If you model this way, is there a way to sense check what the numbers look like? Can you make that useful for planning and running capacity analysis? We'll have videos down the track where we can show examples of what a capacity-based model might look like. But yeah, you can look at what the max will look like, or the maximum your business can achieve will look like, theoretically, and then you will be able to then meet or forecast up to that point. So it provides a sense check. On the flip side, another business model is, okay, well, how many units of something are we then, growing on? So if we quickly, just whilst we're summarizing, if I just add a price to this, and we just look at the examples that I've just stated before, where if we then go, okay, here's the price, we're going to multiply. Now, this is where it's important. If our price per unit here is $10, I haven't finished the formula, but if we just look at the opening balance, we've got 1,000, and you can see the revenue adapt based on that. If we also need to include the new users, we also can. And that quickly changes the numbers. So knowing the way your business operates and going from the top down to try and understand the core underlying drivers helps you to then assess, analyze your business, understand what kind of business model it is. There are plenty more. These are just two examples. Understand the type of business that you have, and then use that to then help you with your forecasting. This is why breaking down volumes into drivers is so important in forecasting and analysis. Hope this was helpful. If it was, put a like, drop a like, give us a click with a like, subscribe if you want to see further. We'll be coming out with a lot more content over time on a more consistent basis. And yeah, we'd love to get the feedback, love to get comments so we can, improve our content and provide some more directed or specific examples to you viewers out there. All right, well, until next time, thanks for joining.